This is the England team that Steve Borthwick has gone with for the weekend. England against Scotland, the Calcutta Cup at Twickenham. It doesn't get much better. The Six Nations returns after the fallow week, and that's what I'm going to speak about in this video. I think there are two headlines from it. There's one change. Ollie Chessum comes in for George Martin, and the second headline is Marcus Smith continues at fullback. There was some discussion about where he'd fit into the team. Would they go for Freddie Stewart? But he sticks at fullback. I'll get into all of that. You can have your say in the comments section. Do give me your views on this team. I don't think there's going to be too many complaints from England fans. Selection's always one of those things that you'll get some people complaining. I think generally speaking, though, people will be pretty happy with this team. You can give me your views. Like the video as well and subscribe to the channel. So I'll start with the Chessum thing first of all. So George Martin off the bench, Chessum comes in. In fact, I suppose more generally actually, before I say that, only the one change. I guess it's you don't change a winning team, do you? What a victory that was for England against France. Borthwick is a guy that has wanted continuity in selection and building partnerships. Huge win for England against the French. We probably don't need to go back over that, but like for so many reasons, it has changed the whole feel around this team heading into the third round. Imagine if they'd lost, like it would have been so negative. And so it's given them a kind of a real breath of fresh air. I don't think you need to change it too much. I think it was a pretty balanced team, but they do make the one change, and that's Ollie Chessum. So why? Why does Ollie Chessum come in and George Martin drop out? I think there's a couple of things here. The number one thing is probably the line out, I think. England's line out hasn't really been great in the opening couple of rounds, and it was much better in the final period of the game against France when Jamie George came off the bench and when Ollie Chessum came on in particular. Now, I say it hasn't been great. On the one hand, England know that. I don't place too much blame for Luke Cowan-Dickie, the starting hooker, or the jumping options for England. With the selections they've gone with, they know that from a line-out point of view, they were always going to be weaker there. It's like one of those things you take away from somewhere to add to somewhere else, but in doing so, and the back row options they've had, and having three open sides against Ireland, for example, you were always going to lose options in terms of your jumpers. And we know that Luke Cowan-Dickie is a very good hooker. Throwing in at the line-out isn't necessarily his strength. So I think Chessum's inclusion is mainly to bolster your line-out and to try and shore up the line-out. What it loses is the heft and muscle and kind of meat of George Martin, because he is a big old boy. So he'll be coming off the bench. I wonder who he will come off the bench for. And I do wonder whether, say, a Ben Earl or a Tom Curry could make way. Chessum shifts to 6, Martin goes into the second row, and it might be another game depending on the situation where we don't see Chandler Cunningham South, for example, because that way England have line-out options throughout the whole game rather than having to substitute and take off Chessum and losing your line-out option later on. But you do miss the weight of Martin, which in terms of your scrums is maybe something you might be concerned about. But I think overall, like Chessum he's such a good player. He's only 24 still. Hasn't started for England since the Scotland game in the Six Nations last year. I'm really pleased to see him back. And I think there are options there, as I say, for how you work it with the bench and to try and have a stronger line out throughout the game, because it's been one of the negative things for England so far this Six Nations. The other thing I mentioned is Marcus Smith at fullback. I'm glad he's there. I think it will be interesting if Scotland change their tactical approach off the back of this. Do they kick to compete more? I think Marcus Smith is athletic enough to still be good in the air, but he's not Freddie Stewart. Freddie Stewart, for all his deficiencies, or not all his deficiencies, for the areas of his game where he's not necessarily maybe as strong, he is excellent in the air. He is a world-class operator. When they stick the ball in the air, if you've got him at fullback, he is brilliant. So that's the kind of trade-off here for England. I like they've gone with Marcus Smith because I thought the axis between him and Finn Smith in the second half of the game against France, I actually thought was pretty good. I don't think people have spoken about it too much. What has been spoken about, though, is some of the smaller details in Marcus Smith's game that were still crucial there. How he dropped on the ball from the restart at the end of the game when it was kind of not spilt, but tapped backwards by Atoje. Smith was the guy to fall in there. I thought overall he had a pretty good game against France. Wasn't his best performance. He wasn't perfect. I think his kicking game from fullback is something that we still need to keep an eye on in terms of the length of his kicks and all this stuff. But overall, I'm glad to see him there because of his counter-attacking. And I think the critique of his defence is unfair as well. I think Marcus Smith has always been a guy that puts his head in the spokes and will do his absolute best. He isn't as big as a lot of other people on the pitch. He will sometimes drop off tackles. But Freddie Stewart, in a different way, can get exposed defensively if he's up against someone that's particularly athletic and he's exposed at the back defensively. So it's kind of, what are you going for? And if England want to be a fast-paced, ball-moving, athletic team, which is what Steve Borthwick has spoken about, then let's continue to see Marcus Smith at fullback. I personally don't have any issue with that. I wonder how many people disagree. The one other thing when I look at this team, from an English point of view, is are we seeing, maybe it's not entirely new, the continuation of a team that is setting out how they want to play the game. Like, I think previously you could argue that England teams could be reactive and they would have selections based upon what they thought the opposition might do or to counteract the strengths of the opposition. And actually, maybe it's always a bit of give and take here. I could be reaching. It could be a bit of a stretch. But I just wonder whether in the last year, almost since that Scotland game, do you remember the Scotland game at Murrayfield? England picked a much more attacking backline. Furbank came into the team. And actually, they messed it up because they'd barely trained, it turned out. They'd dropped the ball all over the place. They coughed it up and Scotland ended up winning. But then they continued for the Ireland game, which they won at Twickenham, and they continued to try and play that style for the New Zealand tour. And look, I know that November didn't go all that well, but there's part of me that wonders if this is more of an England team that are really setting out their stall. Like South Africa, for example. South Africa, they adapt, but they never change the real core identity of who they are for anyone. I know whether this is an England team that is starting to be like that. They want to move the ball, they want to be quick, they want to have playmakers, they want to have athleticism. And partly Marcus Smith's selection speaks to that. What do you reckon? Maybe I'm stretching? I don't know. It's kind of off the top of my head a little bit, but I feel like there's an element of this is what England want to be. And what an opportunity for this England team, right? Like, brilliant win against France, huge credit to them, but you also have to back it up. And one win against a top team once a season or a couple of times a season isn't good enough. They need to back it up, and they need to back it up against a team they haven't beaten in the last 4 times. Which is extraordinary, really. Like, all my lifetime, Scotland would win the odd Calcutta Cup. They'd never have this sort of dominance in the fixture. Like Gregor Townsend's record as Scotland coach against England. I think he's lost once, drawn one. What's he done? Lost once, drawn one, and I think won 4. I think he's played them 6 times. I think that's right. Either way, that is pretty formidable. So let's see how England go. I suppose the other areas of the team, just to finish off on, is, it's funny, isn't it? You look at the bench, Jamie George 97 caps, Elliot Daly 70 caps, and then George Martin's got 21, but it's 7 for Finn Baxter, 9 for Joe Hayes, 8 for Ben Curry, 12 for Harry Randall, 12 for Chandler Cunningham-South. It's still a team where there are relatively kind of extremes of experience. The starting 15 is a bit more even, with Finn Smith, Slightholme, Tom Willis, the guys that don't have many caps. After that, though, you've kind of got Mitchell on 20, Tommy Freeman 17, Ollie Chessum 25. Like, it steadily grows. You're all the way up to Atoje on 90 and Slade 71, Genge 68. So there's a bit more experience, I think, in the starting team. But I think we're still just waiting as well for that period. I don't know, is it an Asher Okafor comes through? Finn Baxter is that guy, isn't he, to see him get more opportunities. Joe Hayes still only 25 as well. So, I think the big marker really for this England team is, can they back it up? Can they back it up against Scotland, having struggled to do that off the back of the win against Ireland in the Six Nations last year? But I don't think there can be too many complaints about that England team. Let me know. Give me a comment, like the video, subscribe to the channel as well. I'll see you in the next one.